It's the West Tigers podcast. It's episode number 76, Wednesday morning, middle of the week. The team came out yesterday afternoon for the next clash against the Bulldogs. We'll talk about that game soon. Eddie Otto, how are your feelings a few days after the Cowboys game, which was an interesting game?
Yeah, it was the proverbial tale of two halves, wasn't it, Joel? But always nice to get a win. And, bigger game this week against the Bulldogs, try and back it up.
Well, I put I normally, halftime put on Facebook my little thoughts about how the game's going, and all I said was 34-0. How good is that? I mean, it was that first half. It was probably the best half of football that the Tigers have had, maybe potentially for a couple of years. Really, I don't remember a performance. And I think what I really enjoyed about that first half is that we really were controlling the tempo of the game. There were times you saw where we put our foot down. There were times when we were able to take our foot off the accelerator. I was thoroughly impressed with that first half. There's not much not to like.
Well, it was certainly one-way traffic. I mean, some of those tries were really soft, but like you said, we were the ones with the line speed, with the tempo, getting over the advantage line, and players that had been a little bit quiet even for a long time. Moses Mbai and guys getting into the game. So hopefully that's something to build on, Joel. I'm just a little bit worried about how meek the opposition was.
Yeah, I mean, and before we look at the second half, obviously that is an issue. But if you look at, and I think it sort of reinforces some of the points that we've made about the West Tigers in games like the Knights and against the Titans. If you look at the way the Cowboys played, it was rather negative play. I mean, aside from the flimsy defence on their goal line, their play was, their line speed. They did so many things that didn't assist them, that didn't help them, and it was sort of the ultimate training run for the Tigers in the first half because the Cowboys were just, not taking the fight up to them at all.
No, I don't know what it is, Joel, but I wish we could play North Queensland every week because for better part of 2 decades, we have dominated them. It's one of those things where it's hard to put your finger on what it is, but I think that's someone said it's like 17 of the last 18 in Sydney. We've won against the Cowboys, and even our record in North Queensland hasn't been too bad over the past decade. I know we won there last year, so I don't know what it is, but I think he's got some big problems, Paul Green, because some of those tries, even though there were some nice passes by Harry Grant and Moses Mbai to get guys over, it was almost like, they would have been tries if it was touch football, some of them.
Yeah. It's ironic, isn't it? If we were playing anybody in the grand final, you'd probably go the Cowboys, which is ironic because that's who we did play 16 years ago.
Well, whether that's the jinx or the curse looming, it's just one of those things. It'd be nice if it was maybe a Sydney rival or something we had a leg up on, but not going to complain. But unfortunately, Joel, I don't think we play them again this year, Cowboys.
No, I don't think we're going to be meeting them in the finals either. I don't like the odds of that. Really, I mean, there's not much more you can say about the first half. It was a spanking. The Tigers did exceptionally well. The Cowboys did exceptionally poorly. The second half, I think most West Tigers fans would say they felt that a comeback was coming. And a West Tigers fan never feels comfortable, even 34 in front. We still can't, watching the clock and getting it down by the minute and can't wait till it's finally in the bag. But I think the injuries have to take into effect. But I think a lot of focus has been on Alex Twal and a bit of focus on Zane Musgrove. But I think what the catalyst for the Cowboys getting some ascendancy was the fact that Jennings went off. And Michael Cheekham was defending in the centres, Moses Mbai on the wing, and it was just an absolute schmozzle.
Yeah, that was a mess. We've been lucky with Michael Cheekham. He can cover a number of positions, but maybe wing is not one of them, Joel, because he was out of position a few times. But I'm prepared to cut them some slack for that second half because you lose, especially Twal, an 80-minute forward, and then you lose an impact forward in Musgrove. And you make that positional change in the back line, they were always going to get some momentum. And I think my memory is a bit foggy now, 4 or 5 days on, but I think even their first try might have come off an intercept or something like that. So it's not like we were playing terribly in the second half. But, there was still a few phases there where you'd like to think, Joel, at 34-0 up, you'd sort of just be able to enjoy the second half. But halfway through, I was thinking, the clock's still got 20 minits to go. Can they score 4 tries in 20 minutes sort of thing? So... all the answers for me, Joel, will be this week against Canterbury. This season is following a very similar pattern to the last 2, 3, 10 seasons, you might say, where we start well, then have a bad loss to a bad team, then flog the Cowboys as we do most years, and now we play Canterbury, who've been, I think, a bit of a bogey side.
Just returning back to the Cowboys, obviously a lot of Harry Grant. I mean, you put on Facebook a very depressing post, which was, the West Tigers' best player is Harry Grant, and he's not even ours. And that's true. I thought Harry was great. I thought Adam Dewey was great. I thought that Mbai was good. I thought really there wasn't a player that didn't perform. That is a depressing thing to come into, and it's a depressing realization. But do you think that if we can get the team up and firing, and I guess the point I'm trying to get to is that if Harry Grant does leave, but the rest of the team can come up to that level, it may not be felt as badly if we can't hang on to him. I know that he can come and make a big contribution this year and maybe boost us. And then if he does go, it won't necessarily be the end of perhaps the ascendancy that we are making.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I still think the spine's so important. And that means that if Harry does go back to Melbourne, that means that Jacob Liddell or Jake Simpkin have to be at that level, because it's just so important. Like I see a team, I don't want to keep harping back to Canterbury, they try their butts off every week, Joel, but they just don't have quality in key positions. They just don't have the talent. Doesn't matter how hard they try. And I see a guy like Harry Grant, and he's played 5 first-grade games. And like I said, I didn't say that lightly. I think he's our best player. I think he's tough, he's skillful, and he's going to ascend quickly. But let's not give up on it, because Cameron Smith he's still playing, and apparently is it Brandon Smith? Apparently he said he's been guaranteed the hooking role next year. So I can't see Harry Grant wanting to go back to a situation where he's either behind two hookers or sitting on the bench behind Brandon Smith. He's a fully fledged number 9 NRL hooker.
Yeah, I mean, and really, if you put it in context, without getting too far off the main subject of West Tigers, but talking about Melbourne, I mean, I think from what I've seen of Cameron Smith, he's playing as well as he was 2 or 3 years ago. I don't see someone who looks ready for retirement. And it's the way he plays the game. It's pretty amazing. He can sort of play in a dinner suit, but he's so effective.
That's going to be a tricky one for them, Joel, because it's like, what do you say to Cameron Smith? You don't want to tell him to retire, but if you've got your hooker maybe for the next 10 years and Cameron's going to play max 1 or 2 years, that's going to be an interesting one if he decides not to retire. I hope he doesn't, because, I thought Harry Grant was my man of the match on Saturday night.
And what is interesting, without building up West Tigers fans' hopes, including our own, when questioned, and Michael Maguire gets the question every week about, is there any chance you'll hang on to Harry Grant? He gives an answer that has an opening there, where he says, along the lines of, well, those things tend to work themselves out in the long run. He's not saying, he's definitely going back to Melbourne. He's diplomatic at first, but then he just leaves the door open. So,
well, Michael Maguire, he's in the business of winning, and that's what we need. We need to be ruthless, Joel. There's no more Mr. Nice Guys here. If we can take someone else's player and do anything possible to make him comfortable and happy at the Tigers and believe we've got a future as a top 4 side, then we've got to do it, because we've been burnt several times before on the other end.
You don't like to read too much into a guy's debut, but I've got to make a mention for Sam McIntyre. I was really impressed with what he brought into that game. Injected with Alex Twal, of course, being off the field with that knee injury. So he probably didn't get the game that he thought he was going to get, but I thought he was really impressive. A bit of aggression there. He's got a bit of size, and for his debut as a forward, who they can sometimes be a little bit invisible, I thought he really stood out.
Yeah, that's the thing, Joel. Aggression. I think we've been lacking that a bit on the bench this year, and he played 46 minutes, so that's a pretty good effort. I don't think he would have expected to play that long, and 8 runs for 70 odd meters. They're not world beating numbers, but it's a good solid debut, and he won't be dropped off the back of that. I think he's named on the bench again this week.
Yeah, that's right. He has been named on the bench. No changes that we didn't really see. Obviously, Zane Musgrove is out. Robert Jennings is out. Tommy Talau comes onto the wing, which most people thought. Oliver Clark starts in the front row, which I think, no disrespect to Zane Musgrove, we haven't seen the best of Zane Musgrove. I don't think we lose an awful lot there. I'm a little bit of an Oliver Clark fan. Luciano Leilua plays his 50th first-grade game in this match. which I thought was just an interesting one, and Matt Eisenhuth starting at lock. And we've seen the return of the ghost that walks, Elijah Taylor, named on the bench. I don't know, where has he been? He's been in the Bermuda Triangle, I think, with Chris McQueen, drinking pina coladas. But he's back this week.
He seems to be that player, doesn't he? He's sort of, I think it might have been similar last year. He might have started the year as a starting lock and then just disappeared, and then all of a sudden he was back. And he's usurped Chris Lawrence. So I don't know what that means for Chris Lawrence's future. I don't think it's great news for him, because with 3 injuries in the forwards, and Joel, he still can't get in the 17. But yeah, that's a bit of a worry this week, those changes for me, because I think Canterbury's got a decent pack. You know, they've got Josh Jackson, Dylan Napa, some big names in that pack. And, you know, I know you're a fan of Oliver Clark. I haven't quite seen it yet. I think he competes hard, but I don't think he's had much impact with the ball. So it's going to be a lot bigger test. I watched them play against Cronulla. That was actually a pretty good game. They play right to the death, Canterbury.
Just on that extended bench, you've got Benji Marshall, you've got Chris Lawrence, you've got Billy Walters, and you've got Reece Hoffman, who's ready to make his debut. Plenty of raps on Reece Hoffman. We're not sure if he'll get a game this week. Maybe there could be a question mark over Tommy Talau's fitness, something like that. That could be a bit of a shadow play, but I'm looking forward to seeing him play. When I look at the bench that is set at this point, Elijah Taylor, Thomas McHaley, Sam McIntyre, Michael Cheekham, I just wish we had, instead of a Michael Cheekham or instead of an Elijah Taylor, another decent, aggressive prop option.
Yeah, well, I suppose they're all unavailable, aren't they? You've got Musgrave suspended. I think, is Packer still suspended?
Yep.
Packer's still suspended. So, and then you've got Chris Lawrence, who's probably not that impact forward. So it's probably our turn to have a few injuries, Joel. I think we've had a pretty good run the last couple of years with injuries, and there can't be excuses, because it's not like we're missing a superstar origin player. We're missing a couple of forwards. We got decent depth there. I think Eisenhuth has been pretty good since he come back into the team and deserves to start. And just a couple of guys I want to give a quick rap to from the Cowboys game. I thought that was Moses' best game for a long time. Good to see him kicking goals. Kicked a nice one from the sideline. Looked a bit quicker. He got in the space there and made a line break. And I think he might have got a try, or he definitely set a couple up with some passes. So I know the opposition was fairly feeble, but it's got to be a confidence boost for him, Joel, because he's had a pretty interrupted last 12 or 18 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, taking on his former club this week, as is Josh Reynolds. Before we just move on to that Bulldogs game, we're sitting in 9th. I've looked at the table. It looks as though really it's a race. You might say a race with Souths and the Sharks. Maybe a resurgent Cowboys might factor. Maybe the Dragons to a degree if they get their act together. But there really only looks to be one spot available, doesn't there? If you look at the line now.
Yeah, someone said it in the media, and I tend to agree. It almost looks like a competition that's in 2 divisions early.
Yep.
And I hate to say that, but you go through the top 8 now, Joel, and barring injuries, and injuries can change things, but, you know, the likes of Roosters, Manly, Melbourne, Newcastle, they look morals to make it. I think there might be even, you know, a couple more there. It's about 17s, like you said, South though. But Canberra's not playing particularly well. So these teams that you think are certainties, they're only 1 or 2 injuries away from being, back in that muddled middle. But it does look like that, Joel, that we're going to be scrapping at the bottom of the 8. And we've already dropped one of those games that we had to have in the Titans. This is another game that we have to have, because our draw is going to get harder towards the end of the year. So, you know, it sounds silly with 14 games to go, but I think it's a must-win against Canterbury.
So I've already nailed my colours to the flag. I'm saying we're going to make the 8th, 7th or 8th spot. You can wax and wane every week. At this point, are we going to make the 8th?
No, I think we're going to finish 9th at this point, if you ask me. I hate to say it, but I look at South at the moment. I look at those 8 teams ahead of us, and I think if they stay on the park, they've got more talent than us, and we'll battle away and we'll win half our games and maybe just miss out. But there is a long way to go, and who knows? We got Penrith after this Canterbury game, and if we can win the next 2 games, Joel, that's 5 out of 8, and we'll probably be sitting 5th or 6th. So things change pretty quickly.
And ironically, sitting in 9th right now. So yeah. It's almost like a magnet. It's like something just this force that we just can't stay away from 9th.
Sometimes it's almost like the last game of the year, you'd rather drop us down to 10, but we seem to just always land in 9. makes it just that little bit more painful.
Now, speaking of the Bulldogs game, I was having a look at the for and against before we came on air, and I didn't realise this. You mentioned the Bulldogs having generally quite consistent performances, but lacking a little bit of class. These stats might show that, these for and against. The Bulldogs, so far this year, have only scored 70 points. We've scored 141, so we've scored twice as many points as them. They've conceded 128 points, but we've conceded more, 134 points. So that just goes to show they're having a dig in defence. They just can't quite get it together in attack.
Yeah, I've watched their last few games, and, they played the Roosters. We haven't played the Roosters yet. They got 40 put on them by them. They had a win. I can't remember who their win was a couple of weeks ago. Their only win of the season.
Dragons, I think, was it?
Yeah, Dragons. They beat them fairly comfortably by 20. And then, like I said, that was a pretty high-standard game, I thought, against Cronulla. Cronulla were desperate for a win, and Canterbury were there. You're right. They're not the most potent side in the world, Joel, but they weren't last year, and they beat us twice. And it's one of those games they circle, I'm sure, at the start of the year, saying, we can beat West Tigers, but they're not, they probably don't see us a team with much more talent than they have. I'm surprised that we're pretty overwhelming favourites. I saw Canterbury were, $2.60 or whatever, which sort of means, 70% in favour of the Tigers, which worries you, I can see straight away. But especially with those couple of injuries. But I was confident going into the Titans game. I just didn't think we could lose to a side that bad. And the last 2 weeks, they've looked exactly that bad again. I still can't believe we lost to them. But I'm concerned about this game because I think, we got a couple of injuries, and Canterbury always give us some trouble. So I think it's 50-50 game.
Well, the saying "once bitten, twice shy" comes to mind, except it's about 1,000 times bitten, 1,000 times shy, 2,000 times shy for West Tigers fans. I mean, I'm not as pessimistic. I think we will beat the Bulldogs. I think that I would like to think that we've turned a bit of a corner and that things are coming together nicely to somewhat take the shine off that statement. Yes, as you said, the team's probably not quite as well structured as we would like it to be. Again, I think we're missing another forward. But surely, as a litmus test for where we're at, this is the kind of game that the West Tigers, if we are a genuine chance of making the top eight, there's just no ifs and buts about it. This is a game that we have to win, and it doesn't matter by 1 point or 20 points. It just has to be one that ends up in our column.
Exactly. Doesn't matter if it's ugly, low scoring, high scoring. I couldn't care less. You just got to be professional and win the game. And that's the thing about Canterbury. They're not going to gift you the game. I don't think they're going to beat themselves like North Queensland did. I'm sorry, but they just gifted us the game with their attitude. And, Canterbury are going to turn up, tackle hard, compete. So we've got to put in an 80-minute performance. And if we do, and if we're at near our best and Canterbury at near our best, you'd expect us to win.
Yeah.
But, it's the litmus test that I'm sure Madge will be asking his players this week at training.
Yeah, I mean, and I think they are traditionally a team that has not complemented our style of play. With their line speed, they're normally fairly aggressive forwards. So it's going to be a good test for the Tigers. I don't recall Josh Reynolds playing against the Bulldogs as yet. I think he's been injured.
No, he definitely did once, Joel. I think it was the first year under Cleary. I think he might have come off the bench. I was out there at ANZ. There was a game we won. It wasn't a bit of a nondescript sort of game. It was a low-scoring game, but I remember him coming off the bench in 2018 in a game at ANZ. He's held his spot, hasn't he, over Benji? I think he's been pretty good the last 2 weeks. He's led the sort of line speed on the kick chases, and I saw him very vocal in the sheds before the game. I like to see that from a senior player and a leader, because I don't think we get enough out of Moses. So at the moment, it's his spot to lose.
Well, and you've got to say defensively, we've looked a lot better in that part of the field as well. So, I can't see him losing the spot at this point. I have a feeling he might be up for a big one against his former team. I think that could be a factor that needs to be taken into account. And Moses Mbye as well, of course. Just moving on directly from that game, did you read the report by the Mole that apparently we're going to move Benji on, even though Benji's off contract, to the Super League or to the retirement home, and sign Kieran Foran? We're going to sign an injury-plagued veteran from a team that's only scored 70 points.
I don't know what planet is the mole on at the moment. That surely can't be true. I hope that's not true, Joel. Nothing against Kieran Foran. I think he's been a good footballer, but yeah, unless he wants to come for a beer and a pie, I wouldn't be paying him much money because, I mean, Canterbury haven't got any value out of him. I know he's probably like Josh Reynolds, a very hard trainer and was once a good footballer, but the body's just sort of letting him down. So I just don't see the logic there, Joel. There might be a 5'8" position to sort of fill for 1 year, but again, do you want to do that for a year with a sort of a veteran whose best football I think is probably behind him?
I think the undertow of it is perhaps the potential, and we don't know how accurate this is. We don't know if somebody's fed the mole any information or what it is. But maybe there is a consideration or a thought in someone's head at West Tigers that maybe Luke Brooks needs to have that running half style, and we need to put an experienced organising half next to him to optimise West Tigers' play. And maybe that means that Josh Reynolds' future is not at the club. I mean, there just seems to be we're doing maths with inaccurate figures. We don't know what's going on, but that seems to be maybe a feeling of what could be happening.
Yeah, I'd like to know Maguire's real thoughts on Luke Brooks. I don't think you get much out of Madge in the press. He doesn't give much away in terms of he's always very upbeat and saying he's got a lot of belief, but I'd love to know his real thoughts on where he thinks Luke Brooks is at, because we've always seen him as, a lot of fans call for him to take control and dominate the game, but maybe you're right. Maybe he'd be better off as more a second receiver who's clear his strengths is his running game, and maybe someone like Kieran Foran. I know he did play good football when, Braithen Astor was at the club, and everyone bagged Braithen Astor because he wasn't great value. But that start of 2014 was some of Luke Brooks' best football with an experienced guy there calling the shots. But then you could argue, he's had Benji there for a couple of years. I'm not really bagging Luke. I'm just thinking, is he? Maybe that's something they might be thinking about long term. Is maybe they could play Brooks as more a 5'8" or running half and have someone who can control the team or take more touches. Because he's sort of, I don't know if he's plateaued a bit this year, but I've been a little bit disappointed in a couple of his games this year.
The other question too is obviously we're getting to that point where I know it's an extended year and the calendar is a little bit different, but you might be sort of thinking, well, if Benji does decide to make this his last year, and maybe Chris Lawrence decides to make it his last year, but maybe that's going to have to come out because recruitment for 2021 is going to start becoming more of a factor. And I think it would be good for the club to have that clarification as to what these guys are doing, and good for the fans to know as well.
Yeah, well, two club legends, and I think they've done a great job with Benji the last few years, and Chris for a decade. But the writing's on the wall, isn't it, Joel? If they can't make this side, can't get in the 17, and Michael Maguire's going nowhere, has to be their last year, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. We are going to. Well, just before we get on to that, I should mention a very good article on westtigerspodcast.com.au if you haven't checked it out. Declan has written an article all about where the West Tigers need to go to from here, what the longer term or the short, medium and longer term plans are, and what the Tigers need to do just to make sure that we continue on, hopefully, this path of improvement and more results, better results and better off-field results. So check that article out. It's quite interesting. It's got a good response on Facebook. So that's at westtigerspodcast.com.au. Let us know your thoughts. You can leave a comment on the article. You can send us an email, feedback@westtigerspodcast.com.au, or follow us on Facebook and have your say on there as well. Did you catch that article, Eddie?
Yeah, I did. I saw it, and he's made some good points there that, we've got to recruit some better players. That's what we've been sort of banging on about, with more talent in the roster and building in key positions. There's pieces there that we like, and we think we've got a young forward pack that can grow. But maybe we're just missing one or two of those dominant players, and that's all in the recruitment and perhaps the retention if we get some of these young guys onto the next level. But I've saved a bit of a rant, Joel. Am I allowed to have a rant about an ex-player?
Let's finish on that note, shall we? But before we get there, and I know where you're going, Adam Hardigan, the football manager of football club, football operations at West Tigers, is going to be a guest on the West Tigers podcast coming up. And this is your opportunity to ask Adam a question. If you have a question for Adam. Now, obviously, whenever anybody does this, a lot of guys do ask, girls ask the same question. So we're going to collate it. So if we don't ask your question, it may be because somebody else has asked almost exactly the same question. So we will try and put all the different issues to Adam when we have him on the podcast. So that's coming up. But if you'd like to do that again, send an email, feedback@westtigerspodcast.com.au. You can do it via Facebook, or you can leave a message. It's also on the West Tigers forum. We've put it there in our podcast post there, and there's quite a few questions there. So we're going to collate all those together, and then we'll put them to Adam Hardigan, and hopefully get some really good answers. And we're looking forward to that chat, Eddie. Not exactly sure when it'll be taking place, but hopefully within the next week.
Yeah, it'd be really good, Joel, because he's got a very important job there at the club. General manager of football. He almost like he sits, I don't know if you want to say above Madge or alongside Madge, but he will have his hands all over our recruitment and retention in the next few years. And I think that's going to be one of the basis of a lot of the questions and conversations is what are the plans for the next 2 years in terms of style of recruitment and potential targets and players coming off contract and managing the cap and all that. So, it'd be really good to have a chat to him.
And I noticed on Facebook, one of our followers asked us to ask Adam Hardigan if he likes pineapple on pizza. So that we're going to really be asking the hard questions then.
Yeah, well, we'll get in trouble if we don't ask some of the hard questions, Joel. I was reading the forum the other day, so let's see what transpires.
Now, tell us about your good friend Ryan, who plays in the blue and yellow.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to actually give one ex-player a rap and just give one ex-player I don't know what you want to say, not a rap, but Corey Thompson. He left with total class, didn't he, Joel? And he sent out a message to the fans. He put in every game he played. He never complained when he got dropped. And I don't think any West Tigers fan would wish anything other than the best for Corey Thompson at the Titans.
Oh, I don't remember a West Tigers player leaving and being held in as high a regard as Corey Thompson. So that says it all.
A shout out to Corey because I think he's the sort of character anyone would want at their football club. Didn't come on big money, didn't come with a big ego, put in every week, always humble, great team man. And then you've got Ryan Madison, Joel, who is he looking for a mate? Like I saw the text he sent I don't know if it was an Instagram message to Corey Thompson, basically saying, "Oh, they dumped you as well." It's like, Ryan, how insecure are you? Are you looking for a mate? Because Corey Thompson actually left the complete opposite way you did, with no class and no answers and some flimsy comment about he won't go on about what happened. And I just think it's really poor form. And I thought it was a bad look for him that he's writing a comment, and hopefully Corey Thompson ignored it, because it's just sort of like, come on, man. Like you left, and you left in a poor way, and now you want to stick the boot in and try and use Corey Thompson as a sort of ally. I just thought it was poor.
Yeah, and it's fitting the club where he is with his little mate in the number 6 jersey, who also did entirely the wrong thing and threw a tantrum on the way out the door. I think that the thing with, this is where social media is a problem for young guys. And look, most people have class and most people know right from wrong, and that wasn't the right thing to do. But it's interesting because it makes you think, what was the truth behind what happened here at West Tigers? And I'm not casting dispersions or saying that it was some terrible thing that the West Tigers did to him. But whenever you have that situation where we don't know exactly what happened, because as far as you and I were concerned, Eddie, we thought he was a fantastic guy and a fantastic player. We had no inkling, and then he dropped us like a bad habit. So it's just kind of weird. It always does play on you. It would be nice to just know. We probably never will know exactly what happened. But, I mean, everybody seems to be saying, well, he just didn't like Madge. He didn't want to work hard. Yeah, but it's just, the whole thing is just such a shame, and it's left a bad taste in my mouth. And the only thing that maybe does make you feel better is that when he does do stupid things like this, you think, well, you're not the kind of guy we want at this club anyway.
Yeah, well, I'll guess what happened, Joel, and it was nothing, because that's what he's basically come up with, is hot air. In any time he's been interviewed, he's fumbled and bumbled his way around and looked silly rather than just own it. Just own it, Ryan, and say, mate, I wanted more money at Parramatta, or I didn't get on with the coach. Just own it. Don't say some mysterious thing went on behind the scenes, because I just don't think it's true. And he's a good player, no doubt about it. But it's just annoying. I mean, he's gone. His team's on near the top of the ladder, so why feel the need to? It's like he's just insecure. You feel the need to have a go at your club who's looked after you, gave you a shot at a starting back row when you come to a club as a bench player at the Roosters, elevated you to 18th man in Origin, and you want to take a shot. It's just immature, poor form.
Well, especially when we placated his move. We didn't hold him, and he didn't play in reserve grade for 2 years, waiting out a contract, and ruined his career. We just said, okay, go then. Yeah.
Well, that's
bizarre.
That's one thing if I'm allowed, I might want to ask Adam Hartigan, is that, are we a pushover? Because, as much as we don't like Mitchell Moses and Ryan Madison now, they're two pretty good players in a team that's on the ladder. So, and they were under contract to West Tigers. So do other clubs, don't want to say roll over, because these players obviously want to go, and what do you do if they're going to throw their hands in the air and not play or not try or not train hard? But it's a situation sometimes where I'm sure clubs maybe dig their heels in and maybe turn their attitude around, because it's like, what did we get in return for Mitchell Moses and Ryan Madison? If we got a player in return or something, a direct swap, I'd be saying, okay, well, there's something. But that's the frustration for me. We lost two good players because they were sulking, and I'm not sure what we got in return.
Well, you could say we got Luciano Leilua. That's probably, if you wanted to go like for like, that's probably the trade-off that we did get. We probably wouldn't have got Leilua, which then means we might not have got his brother. And I thought Joey had a good game against. It's starting to come together a bit for him. But yeah, I agree completely. It's easy to say it when they're at a different club and all of that. But I look at Mitchell Moses now, and I think, what a irritating person. I mean, the way he, his body language and this every time. I know I've said it before, but it just irks me. So I don't mind that he's gone. Whatever. It is what it is, and we just got to move on. And there will be better players coming, and better times will come.
Okay. No. Yeah, I mean, you're right. We got to move on. I don't want to say we want them back or we should be, but it's just you get those situations again. You'd like to think the club's strong enough and maybe winning more. That's these things. I don't know. Maybe it's just a character thing with those two guys. But
Ivan Cleary is another one. I mean, basically, he signed a long contract with us and then wanted out, and we basically said, well, yeah, okay, see you later.
Well,
and that worked out all right in hindsight, but it's still at the time, and that was a very emotional period for the club, and it's probably set us back a few years.
Well, his contracts that he'd made has set us back a few years. I don't know if him leaving set us back a few years, but
his legacy remains.
I'd say more the Jason Taylor, Isaac Moses sort of beginning of 2017 set us back more than a few years, because, there's a player now who's the best player in the world who could still be at our club. It's not, but let's move on, Joel.
Yeah. See what Eddie was doing there? He just was wiping Ryan Madison's name off his Christmas card list. I could see what you were doing there. No Christmas card for Ryan this year.
No, mate. That's anyway. We're still kicking along. It would just be nice to get one back, because it just seems like we lose guys and they go on, and even if they do the wrong thing, they seem to prosper.
Yeah, I agree. There's not much we can do about it today. Have a good few days, Eddie, and we'll reconvene shortly.
Thanks, Joel. See you, mate.